You know what my favourite type of review to write is? The kind for an album with what seems like virtually no rollout, press release, interviews, or even reviews less than 3 months after it's out. It gives me a bit more of a challenge due to the lack of context that would otherwise be given to me like a tutorial booklet, or a large chalk outline with an arrow next to it saying, big social theme here. In the end, I have to do the interpretation work for myself, which I do anyways, but usually there's an article or two to rely on in times of real uncertainty. Sort of like a cheat sheet. Okay, yeah, it's cheating, right. I want to then say that this task becomes increasingly harder when the music itself begins written in a language I've forgotten most of how to understand, despite having taken it as a high school subject for half a decade, or features little to no lyrics at all, and is instead pieced together by the chopped up howls of an operatic enchantress and the spidery slivers of post-industrial textures. In other words, I sat at my laptop asking myself, what the bloody hell am I supposed to do to truly understand this? But that's the challenge, isn't it? I'm not here to re-spew you something you've already heard before. This should spark no misunderstanding. I love Sadaf's history of heat. It's fiercely creative and makes a vivid and arousing statement with little to no words at all, relying purely on sound and specific rearrangements of said sound to tell its mutating, nauseating story. The Bandcamp page does tell me that History of Heat is the story of a fragmented romance, but what I got from it was a specific sense of intimacy, the kind of thing that brings you close to the narrator and almost inserts you into their close-up view like a pair of binoculars. The fragmentation of the vocals and the glassiness of the percussion and drone textures reminds me specifically of what might happen if you saw your reflection in a shattered mirror, which sounds cheesy, but in the context of this listen it sounds unsettling, like you're forced to self-reflect, but reluctantly, like if you stare too deep you might actually have to come to terms with the horror that lies within you. What I got from History of Heat was a sense of self-fragmentation, hence how sprawling and disconnected every moment seems to be, whether it was the tribalistic drumming on the title track, the mad fusion of machine-like club music bass lines reminiscent of genres like gabba, piercing through the dissonant violin droning on Perfection, or the vibra-slap on Guttermoon that evokes the sound of a rattlesnake slithering through the splendor. On Apparition, you hear the repetition of what could she be missing, what could she be missing, as if it were a narrator implying to you that the answer is right there in plain sight. But the thing is, it's not. I still don't know what the fuck is happening, which is sort of the beguiling mystery and the obtuse downfall of something so leg spread open to interpretation. All I know for sure is that musically it stands as a near perfect demonstration of how to program an album that sounds as if it's slowly piecing itself together as quickly as it's falling apart, sculpted with nonsensical sounds that all make sense in tandem. At no point does it sound like a pastiche of something else. The entire album sounds like an uneven revving of tension that only burdens the narrator until she can no longer take it on the shocking midpoint of the album, Ditectrice. This isn't some random jump scare in the middle of the track listing, one that happens to skip like a broken DVD player and wails loudly like the kid that can no longer watch his favourite Bear in the Big Blue House episode because of it. It's also a vital turning point in the middle of the album, or rather a reset button. All the tension that the album had built up until that track is wiped clean with this, and the album does a fantastic job of attempting to recollect the pieces and build itself up again afterwards, even if it ends up being shaken hard like a mighty game of Buckaroo. The history of heat repeats itself. Part of this makes me feel like the album is exploring some sense of detachment, or further yet, trauma, because the album isn't a smooth build-up, it shivers in spikes and random points, as if to emulate an unwanted flashback. War isn't just physical, it can also be internal. The album does this fantastic job of beginning like an eerie sunset, misleading you a little bit, before plunging you into a horrific darkness rife with anger and dissociation and self-mistrust, but mostly confusion, just a general inability to sit still, like me in a lecture after forgetting to piss. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. For something that I was supposedly unable to conjure up many words about, I sure managed to say a fair bit, although in fairness, a lot of it did consist of me actually talking about how I was unable to conjure up many words about it.